So, Mr. Zivanovic, first of all, I wish to thank you for having stuck to your estimated time for the statement, opening statement. Your first witness is Mr. Momchilio Kraisnik. Yes, good morning to you, Mr. Kraisnik.
Dobar dan.
Good morning.
You have been summoned as a defense witness by the defense team for Mr. Popović. You are aware of that?
I'm aware of that.
So you are also familiar with our rules, one of which requires that before you start giving evidence, you are expected to make a solemn declaration to the effect that you will be testifying the truth. Are you prepared to make that solemn declaration?
Da, jesam, gospodine sudija.
Yes, Your Honor.
Registrar, if you could give him the text, and Mr. Kraisnik, if you could read it out, please, and that will be your solemn undertaking with us.
Svečano
I solemnly declare that I'll speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Okay. I thank you, Mr. Kraisnik. Please make yourself comfortable. There are a few things that I need to explain to you. Now, I take it that you have accepted to give evidence in this case after having been duly approached and asked to give evidence. Is that correct?
da.
Yes.
Now, it's common knowledge that you have stood trial here, being found guilty, sentenced, and you have an appeal pending.
Da, gospodine.
Yes, Your Honor.
There are two issues that arise out of that straight away that I need to discuss very briefly with you. I know that in your proceedings, in your trial, and I think also in the appeal proceedings, you have decided to conduct your own defense. Do you confirm that?
Da, jesam.
I do indeed, yes.
But these are different proceedings in which you are only involved as a witness. According to our rules, you still have a right to be assisted by counsel, should you choose to ask for this or to request this. Has this been explained to you?
Da, jest.
It has been, yes.
Have you asked to be assisted by counsel for the purpose of today's testimony?
Meni je
The registrar has offered me the services of counsel, which I declined and decided to appear here without a counsel.
All right, so you are confirming to us now that you don't require or you don't request the assistance of counsel.
jest.
Yes.
The next thing I wanted to alert you to is a right that you have, which is common to all witnesses here. And it applies to you because for all intents and purposes, your case is still pending before the appeals chamber, and your testimony here could potentially prejudice your case before the appeals chamber. So I need to alert you to a right that you have to ask to be exempted from answering any question that may be put to you, which, rather than incriminating you, could prejudice your appeal before the appeals chamber, but which could also perhaps expose you to criminal proceedings, which could be incriminatory in your respect, in your regard. Now, in such instances, irrespective of who is asking you this question, you have a right to ask us, the trial chamber, to exempt you from answering such questions. This right is not absolute. We can choose to grant such an exemption, or we can choose to compel you to answer the question that is put to you. If we compel you to answer the question that is put to you, then the consequence is that if in answering that question you're truthful, whatever you say, and which could be incriminatory, will not be used against you in future proceedings before this tribunal or elsewhere. Do you understand the import of this advisory that I have just explained?
Yes.
Yes, I do, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
So, there is one final thing that I need to communicate to you. You are currently in detention at the detention unit that we have here in Scheveningen. And I understand that you are being detained together with the accused in this trial.
Da, sa dvojicom je.
Yes, with two of them.
Two of them. We need to put in place an order for your segregation from these accused for the entire duration of your testimony here. After which, of course, the segregation will stop. So, in these circumstances that you have confirmed, namely that you are currently being detained together with some accused in this trial, on behalf of the trial chamber, I am ordering that you be segregated from them during the course of your testimony. Case you fail to understand why, I will just explain to you that this is a standard procedure, and it is directed at minimizing any risk of interactions that might have an effect on the reliability of a witness's testimony. So you understand that?
Da, nešto.
I do, but I would like to inform you about one thing, if you will allow me.
Of course, Mrs. Grace, go ahead.
The deputy head of the detention unit, Mr. Fraser, invited me on Thursday or Friday, I don't remember what day, to come to see him, and ordered me to segregate myself from Mr. Baer and Mr. Borovchanin, and he established a regime. I spend all my days in my room, whereas they are in their own rooms or in the common room, so we don't have any contact with each other. When we go for walks, we never went together. I promised that I would obey the regime, and they have done the same. He told me that he had already received an order to that effect from your trial chamber.
No, the order hadn't been communicated. Of course, there were discussions, and we wanted to know whether you were being detained with others or whether there was any segregation in place already, as sometimes there is. And we also made clear that this would be forthcoming so that the detention unit commander or deputy commander would have advance notice of this and take the make the necessary preparations, but that's about it. Anyway, the position is what it is. You are expected to last here giving evidence for a few days. I think we've come to the stage when Mr. Zivanovic can start. Mr. Zivanovic, please go ahead.
Thank you,
Mr. Krajisnik.
Good morning, Mr. Krajisnik. Answer good morning question. I would kindly ask you to tell us for the record or to confirm your name. It is Momcho Krajisnik, is it not? Answer yes. I know that there has to be a break between your question and my answer, and that's why I'm making short pauses. Question, you're correct there. I would kindly ask you just briefly to give us your age and your ethnic background. Answer. I was born on the 20th of January 1945, and I'm Serb. Question. Could you please tell me about your educational background? Answer. I have a degree in economics. I have a master's degree in economics. Question. And could you also tell us about your professional background? Answer. I worked before the first multi-party election in a company called Energo Invest. There I was a member of the management board of one of the daughter companies. After the multi-party elections in 1990, I was elected a member of parliament and later on as the speaker of the parliament of Bosnia and Herzegovina. During the war and before the war as well, from October 1991 until 1996, I was the Speaker of the Assembly of the Serbian people, i.e. of Republika Srpska. After the Dayton Accords, I became a member of the Presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina. After that, for a year, I was in private business, and I've been here since 2000, a detainee in Scheveningen. Mr. Krajisnik, let me start by asking you one thing that interests all of us here, something that will be the main topic of your testimony here. First of all, do you remember that you were presiding over a session of the Assembly of Republika Srpska that was held on the 12th of May 1992 in Banja Luka? Answer, yes, I do, I did. Question, do you remember that at that session a debate was held on the strategic goals of the Serbian people in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Answer, yes, I remember that. Question, Did you personally take a floor? Did you participate in the debate? Answer. I participated in the wording of the strategic goals before the very session. During the session itself, I participated partly in the discussion in order to summarize the debate, and that was part of my engagement within the framework of the debate on the strategic goals, on the 6 strategic goals. Answer. At that time, which means on the 12th of May 1992, when this session took place, had the armed conflicts already started in Bosnia and Herzegovina? Answer, yes. Armed conflicts were already underway. Question. Can you tell us briefly about the atmosphere at that session of the National Assembly of Republika Srpska? What was the mood of the assemblymen? What was their attitude towards the then political leadership? Answer. This was the first assembly session after the beginning of the war or the armed conflict. I invited the assemblymen to Pale, but they couldn't come because the territorial communications had been interrupted. That's why we went to Belgrade, and from Belgrade we took a plane to Banja Luka, and we held the session there. The atmosphere was rather heated. Every assemblyman had brought the impression from their own area. Some people had members of family killed, some lost their homes, some had been through ill treatment. A lot of families had been separated, so the overall situation at the session was very grave. And the assemblymen, to put it that way, were only prepared to say no. They were against everything. Their attitude was negative. They put up resistance to the danger that was imminent and to something that was new to them, which was war, that nobody had been aware of before the war actually started.
Let us go back to the development of the strategic goals that you referred to a moment ago. Can you tell me what the basis for the wording of the strategic goals was? Answer. In late April, between the 27th of April and 2nd or 3rd May, I can't recall the exact date now, a meeting was held as part of the conference on Bosnia and Herzegovina in Lisbon, if I remember well. We achieved certain things there. We corrected the situation on the map and some other matters. And we were quite optimistic that settlement was looming there. We were told that through bilateral contacts we should try and form an agreement on our respective views. After the conference, we went to Pale. We also went to Herzegovina in an attempt to formulate our next steps. On the 11th of May, a public announcement was made that the conference would be stopped. At that point, we presented our view as to the way in which the Serb delegates, the members of the Serb delegation of Republika Srpska, would develop their position for the negotiations. Through the 6 strategic goals, we defined all the views that we had previously advocated and suggested in the negotiations. These were some points that we believed we could achieve and upon which we believed we had the agreement of the 2 other sides, the Croat and Muslim, and the 4th party, which was the international community. This was the formulation of our positions. We acted upon the suggestion that the Serb delegates, as representatives of the Serb people, were not in tune with the sentiment of the people when negotiating with the international community. This was a way of informing the international community and the public at large about our positions, since all the meetings and sessions we held were public. If my understanding is correct, the discussions about the strategic goals held at the various sessions were public. In other words, the members of the public could follow what was going on at the session through direct broadcasts or press coverage. Answer: yes, all our sessions were public. The transcript of the sessions indicate that many people were present who were not MPs. For instance, I recall one Captain Garlich having been present there, and I'm sure that there were others. It was also open to the public at large. The room housing these sessions had a public gallery which was open to anyone who wanted to follow what was going on. Question. I will show you the minutes from that particular assembly session. This is Prosecutor Exhibit P025.
Da li se možda sećate?
Do you recall this document by glancing its cover page, although we can go through all the others? I believe you had an opportunity to look at the document during our proofing session. Answer: the minutes and the transcript of the session was something that was known and discussed in my case too.
Da li se sećate?
Question. Do you recall who was it who spoke about these goals, who explained the goals to those present at the session? Answer. As part of the report on the current situation, Mr. Karadzic explained the 6 strategic goals to the MPs present. Question. To refresh your memory, I will read out part of the minutes from the session held on the 12th of May 1992. That's page 12 in e-court. And you will have occasion to see what it's all about. That's the last paragraph, and it reads, the interpreter's note, we don't have the translation. The Serbian side in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the presidency, the government, the Council for National Security we formed, have adopted strategic priorities of the Serb people, or rather the strategic goals of the Serb people, the first of which is the separation from the other two ethnic communities, separation of the state. Can you please clarify what sort of separation is referred to here in respect of the, or in relation to the other two ethnic communities? Answer. This strategic goal was a demand that we had reformulated, and this was the position of the international community, that within Bosnia-Herzegovina we were able to have our own constituent unit, which we could style as a state or any sort of unit. In order to set it up as a constituent unit, the Cutileiro plan laid out the way in which it was to be done, by separating into different entities along an ethnic principle, where individual municipalities would be separated into separate constituent units, and this would have been the way of achieving this goal.
Da li možete da...
Question. The separation of the three ethnic communities, was it part of and parcel of the Cutileiro plan? Answer. These strategic goals were, in fact, reformulated Cutileiro principles, which we believed we could achieve through negotiations, along with all the other aspects upon which we had the consensus of both the international community on the one hand and the Croat and Muslim sides on the other.
Hvala.
Question, thank you. Let me show you one other document and ask you whether this is another part of Cutileiro plan. This is Exhibit 1D 1156.
U prvom pasusu
The first paragraph or chapter of the document under A reads that Bosnia-Herzegovina would be a state composed of three constituent units based on national principles and taking into account economic, geographic, and other criteria. Do you recognize these principles from the Cutileiro plan? Answer, yes, I do. Question. Can we now turn to the next page, or rather page 3 of the document? Where under E, the following is stated, and this is true for both of the versions, that a working group will be established in order to define the territory of the constituent units based on national principles and taking into account economic, geographical, and other criteria. Do you recall this other principle from the Cutileiro plan as well? Answer, yes, I do. There's a map that goes with this plan, which indicates the makeup of the population as it was in the previous years. I will not be asking you about the map, but did there exist a map that was produced by representatives of the international community led by Mr. Cutileiro? Answer, yes. Question, please look at Exhibit 1159.
Jedan D 1159.
1D 1159.
Seems to be some problem with that because we can't find it either.
Možda možemo da...
Perhaps the map can be placed on the Elmo and the witness can have a look at it.
If it's readily available, I think that would be a good suggestion.
Yeah.
But for the future, check the reference number because doesn't seem to tally. Yes, your question, Mr. Zvanovic.
Da li možete, ako vidite...
If you can see the map, can you please confirm for us that this is indeed the map? Answer, yes. This is the map that was produced following the meeting in early May 1992. And I'm referring to the meeting in Lisbon. I believe it was held in Lisbon. Question, thank you. Can you please explain how this meeting came about, or rather how this idea came about of negotiating with the help of the European community, or rather its representative, Mr. Cutileiro? Answer. Once the referendum on independence was scheduled in Bosnia, which was in late January 1992, we received an initiative document to the effect that a representative of the international community would come with a proposal that would form a compromise between our option, whereby we wanted, I mean the Serb side, to keep Bosnia-Herzegovina within Yugoslavia, and the option espoused by the Muslim and Croat sides, whereby Bosnia and Herzegovina should become a state independent of Yugoslavia. They were testing us to see whether we were prepared to have Bosnia and Herzegovina recognized as an independent country and having Bosnia and Herzegovina cantonalized, where we would have our own cantons or regions. We were told that the principle would be the majority of different ethnic groups in different parts of the country. The first mediator in that effort was the leadership of Serbia, specifically Mr. Milosevic. Later on, Mr. Cutillero also showed up and presented these principles, and that was how the conference on Bosnia and Herzegovina commenced at the time.
Pre ove konferencije
before the commencement of the conference was a plebiscite held at which the Serb people were given an opportunity to state whether they wanted an independent Bosnia-Herzegovina or some other alternative. Answer, yes, it was held. Question, can you tell us briefly what the upshot of that was? Answer. By absolute majority, over 90% of the population, of the Serb population, and this included also a small percentage of Bosnians, Muslims, that's to say in Croats, and a small percentage of those who declared themselves to be Yugoslavs. These members of the population opted to stay within Yugoslavia.
Da li ja pravilno shvatam onda da...
Question. Did I understand correctly that consenting to the Cutillero plan would mean giving up the decision or the results of the plebiscite? Answer, yes.
I to je bio značajan ustupak koji je...
Question. It was a significant concession that the Serbian side made at that time. Answer, that is correct, and I wish to explain if I may. Question, please do so. Answer, on the 15th of October, against the constitution, the Muslim and Croatian side came up with a memorandum establishing a platform concerning the sovereignty of Bosnia-Herzegovina. The Serbian MPs vetoed it, and we were told then that we did not have the right to refuse an independent Bosnia on behalf of the Serbian people, because the other side claimed that the Serbian people were divided and that there were many of them who were in favor of the independent Bosnia. We organized a referendum in order to establish how and what it is that the Serbian people want and whether they wanted the decision they had adopted. It was done in order to feel the pulse of the people. When we said that we would accept independent Bosnia, but regionalized, we wanted to offer a compromise solution, which, again, required a referendum on the part of all citizens in Bosnia-Herzegovina, including the Serbian people. We did not play it upon the Serbian people, so to say, but our wish was to feel the pulse of the public. When I say we, I meant the negotiating team. We were told either you accept a compromise or you lose everything, and we were in favor of a compromise. We stood by those principles throughout the negotiations until the very end.
Recite mi, molim vas,
Question. According to the Cotillero plan and according to the strategic goals you set up, was it envisaged that within those predominantly uni-ethnic entities, there would be space for people of other ethnic backgrounds? Answer, certainly. In no way did we strive for any movements of population. That was completely excluded.
sada pročitati treći strateški.
Question. I wanted to read to you the third strategic goal. I will not go through all 6 of them, since they are not overly relevant for the case here. However, I would move to the third goal now.
Samo trenutak. On glasi:
It reads, the third strategic goal is to establish a corridor in the Drina River Valley, that is, eliminate the Drina as a border separating the two worlds. Please clarify the third strategic goal. Given that there is a mention in the Drina River Valley and a corridor there, as well as the border between the two worlds. Firstly, please explain whether the corridor and the borders referred to were two separate issues or one and the same. Answer. Before the international community was included in early 1992, we had had frequent contacts of the 3 sides in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I represented Bosnia and Herzegovina in the negotiating team when negotiating with Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, and other republics. During those negotiations with the Muslim side, we put forth our reasons as to why we cannot accept an independent Bosnia and Herzegovina and us being separated from our homeland, that is Serbia, and why it is that we cannot accept that a proper, so to say, border be set up at or along the Drina. This was the same position that the Croatian side had. As was confirmed later, a solution came up, put forth by the Muslim side. They said, we don't have to have a border with border posts and requiring people to move about with passports. Those borders have to be permeable. For example, if one wants to go from Bosnia to Serbia, one shouldn't need a passport. And that applied to Croatia as well. Mr. Izetbegović, during the first Congress of his party, stated that clearly. I think it was in December 1991 when he said, no matter what the solution for Bosnia and Herzegovina is going to be, there will be no border at the Drina River. It will not require having a passport. And in that way, that represented a relief, psychologically speaking, to our side. As you will see in the negotiations and in the Dayton agreements, as well as the Cotillero plan, special links were envisaged between the entity of Republika Srpska with the other so-called neighboring states. Of course, the federation enjoyed the equal status. That was primarily upon our request, although the Muslim side was to use it as well because there were Muslims in Serbia, as well as the Croatian side in Bosnia because the neighboring state of Croatia was nearby. That was the reason why we inserted this goal as such. As for the corridor, if you study Mr. Karadzic's presentation or his speech, he said, we can now see enclaves in the eastern part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, but the corridor is there to link up our different territories. As one of our priorities, we stated that we wanted links among the different parts of our constituent unit. Mr. Cutiero said the following: these are the principles, and as for the corridors and the rest, you have the right to agree on them with the other side, even if it requires an exchange of territory. That is why we introduced a corridor between the southernmost part of our ethnic territories, which is southern Herzegovina and Romania, as well as Semberia. And this includes the other corridor, which, however, was not a part of your question.
Pomenuli ste
Question. You mentioned that it was Mr. Ali Izetbegović's idea. Please have a look at Exhibit 1105. It is 1D 1105.
Ovo je govor gospodina Izetbegovića na...
This is Mr. Izetbegović's speech during the first Congress of his party, the Party of Democratic Action. Please have a look at page 2. Its ultimate paragraph.
Gospodin
Mr. Izetbegović says, interpreter's note, we do not have the official translation. In such a situation, a sovereign Bosnia-Herzegovina in a free community of nations is the only guarantee of a dignified and free life, not only for the Muslim people, but for the Serbs and Croats as well. Given the ethnic makeup, such a Bosnia-Herzegovina needs to develop special relations with both Serbia and Croatia. Irrespectively of their mutual links, that is, the links between those two independent states. We believe that needs to be resolved. The Serbs should not have a feeling that they are divided from Serbia with a state border. The same applies for Croatians. Therefore, no passports for the Serbs along the Drina or the Croats along the Una River. Does this sentence accurately reflect what Mr. Izetbegović said concerning the future borders of Bosnia-Herzegovina? Answer. Mr. Izetbegović fairly stated what he had stated during the negotiations. This is correct. Question. Let us go back again to the principles of the Cutiero Plan. It is 1D1156. We've already seen that.
To je druga strana.
Page 2.
druga strana
Page 2, please.
u obe verzije.
In both versions.
U engleskoj verziji
In the English, it spills over to page 3. It is chapter D. Have a look at the last sentence. It reads, a constituent unit may establish and preserve links with other republics and states, provided that they are in keeping with inviolability of Bosnia-Herzegovina as such. Does this correspond to the Cutiero Plan principles? Answer yes, and they were later termed special parallel links or relations.
Da li se vi slažete da su
Question. The sentences we quoted from Mr. Izetbegović's speech, as well as this particular sentence taken out of the outlines of the plan concerning the Constitution of Bosnia-Herzegovina, is the same thing that you envisaged as part of one of your strategic goals of the Serbian people? Answer, yes. However, in the goals, it was reformulated.
ali u suštini
Questions, but the essence of it is the same. Answer, yes, it is.
samo trenutak.
If I may have a moment.
Gospodine Krajišnik,
Mr. Krajišnik, I read the entire minutes of the Assembly session of the 12th of May 1992. However, I did not see any mention of any decision being adopted according to the strategic goals. I did not see that there was a vote of acceptance or anything of that sort. Can you tell me whether a decision was made at the session, a formal, legally binding decision, or not? Answer. There was no decision made, and there was no vote on the strategic objectives.
da li je to
Question. Was it because the presentation of the strategic goals was there merely to acquaint the MPs with?
Nichols?
I've been holding back, but there's been several leading questions, and now I'm going to start to object.
All right. So you've put on notice Mr. Zvanovic, and you need to adjust your style of questioning accordingly. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nichols.
da li možete
Can you explain what were the reasons that no decision was made concerning the strategic goals? Answer. The strategic goals were there as a type of information, the goal of which to acquaint the MPs with what the delegation's position was at the negotiations. It could have happened that there was a vote on the objectives because that was the first session and we were under a lot of pressure and the agenda was extensive. However, it did not happen because it wasn't our goal to oblige anyone by adopting any decisions. Our goal was to continue with the negotiations.
ja sam, gospodine Krajišnik,
Question, Mr. Krajicnik. I had occasion to see, and I showed to you, an official gazette of Republika Srpska, its edition of the 26th of November 1993, in which the strategic goals were published in the form of a decision. Please explain how that came about. Answer. I can respond in two ways, depending on the decision of the appeal chamber. Sorry, trial chamber, because I keep having the appeal chamber in mind. I can tell you what I recall, and I can tell you what is it that I found out during my appeal proceedings, and something I discovered by chance since our last meeting on Friday. It has to do with the publication of this decision, and I can now tell you what it is that I recall, and it is up to you whether you wish to hear the other two pieces of information, because these represent two missing links in a chain of which I wasn't aware at the time of my testimony. I recalled what was happening with the strategic goals up until the session. I know why we presented them. However, I had no knowledge of them being published. I had forgotten that, and only when I reviewed the documentation here, I conducted different investigations, and I came up with certain results. This is what I recall, and this was part of my testimony. When testifying in my case, I based it on that. I testified on what I remembered, and I was unable to view the whole background and the situation. This is what I can recall off the cuff. I never at the time knew that the strategic goals had been published. I may have forgotten, but it is only now that I'm filling in the gaps in my memory.
Mr. Krajicnik, I'm not going to insist on you belaboring your answer with that respect. However, we heard an explanation here.
Mr. Nichols?
Sorry to interrupt. Just to clarify, if I can, I'm not sure it's clear from the answer what time the witness was referring to when he said, "I never at that time knew that the strategic goals had been published." Is that a reference to the time he testified in his trial, which is the way it appears?
Do you understand, Mr. Krajicnik, do you understand what Mr. Nichols' concern is? Yes, can you enlighten us on it?
As far as I can remember, if my memory serves me correctly, up to the moment when I arrived here in the detention unit, I don't remember ever having been aware of the strategic goals being published. Let me put it this way. I did not have them available to me because I was not aware of them. I only knew that they were discussed at the assembly meeting, and I knew that they were never voted upon. This is what I meant when I provided my answer to Mr. Jovanovic.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Is that does that satisfy your concern? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Jovanovic.
Question. Mr. Krajicnik, we've had a witness here, actually an expert witness, who told us that the strategic goals had not been published for a long time because they would have revealed a criminal act. That's the reason why these goals were not published in the official gazette. Oh, so that's not correct.
One more, stop. Yes, Mr. Nichols.
Could we have the reference, please?
Yes. Mr. Zivanovic,
It was
who are
in
you
te-
referring to? And
it was in testimony, in one part of testimony of Mr. Butler.
but I
but,
imagine so. But
But I cannot say right now what is a part of his testimony.
this is how it shouldn't be. You
That-
should
that
be
is-
prepared all the time to give a specific reference if you're referring to a particular part of someone else's testimony. Yes,
I've just
Mr.
got the pages.
All
It
right.
is page 19,672 until 674.
Yes,
Thank you.
Mr. Nichols. I take it you will check while we proceed. Yes, Mr. Krajisnik, do you wish Mr. Zivanovic to repeat his question? Or do you still have memory of it?
Da, sjećam se.
I remember the question.
Ja sam odgovorio
I answered that what the expert witness said was not correct, and I can prove that by documents that I have discovered in the meantime. Since Friday, actually on Saturday, when I was preparing myself for this testimony, I came across some documents, and I can show you how the decision was taken and why the decision was only published on the 25th of November 1993. I can give you the whole course of the process leading to the publication of the decision.
Recite mi, molim vas.
Question, tell me, please. From the moment when the debate on the six strategic goals took place at the National Assembly session in May 1992 and further on, did the political leadership of the Republika Srpska kept on insisting on these goals in the negotiations with the other parties and in the negotiations that were being carried out under the auspices of the international community?
Mr. Nichols.
Again, it's a leading question.
I don't
Yes.
believe so.
You don't believe so?
Yeah.
We have no doubt in our mind, not even the least possible doubt, that, of course, this is a leading question. So please be kind enough to rephrase it, Mr. Zivanovic.
Yes, I'll do that. Thank you. Gospodine Krajiš,
Mr. Krajisnik, was the international community ever informed about the strategic goals from 1992 onwards? Answer, yes. Question. When it comes to these strategic goals, were they the foundation for striking some future deals and concluding some negotiations? Answer. Some 15 minutes ago, I said that based on those principles, we conducted all of our negotiations up to the Dayton Accords, which means that we advocated these goals and we insisted on these goals being implemented during the negotiations because they were the reflection of what had been agreed by the four sides at the beginning of 1992.
A da li su ti strateški ciljevi I u kojoj meri, ako jesu?
And as for these strategic goals, were they incorporated and to what extent in the Dayton Peace Accords?
Strateški cilj
Answer. As for the strategic goals that we advocated during the negotiations, all we got was the Republika Srpska and the corridors. We did not get the part of Sarajevo that we had agreed upon. We did not get access to the sea because the proposal that was adopted by the Dayton Accords was not signed and was not attached to the final version of the Dayton Accords. In my view, it was not the goal for them to be realized. It was the goal to work on those and to achieve Republika Srpska and to achieve an independent Bosnia and Herzegovina on the other hand, and to lay down a foundation for independent Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Da li možete da mi odgovorite?
Question.
Mr. Nichols.
Don't wish to interrupt, Your Honor, but I found the portion of the transcript my friend referred to. For the record, what Mr. Butler said on page 19764 in answer to a question. Answer. My understanding is that while the actual strategic objectives were articulated in May 1992, for whatever reason, the government of the Republika Srpska did not decide to publish those in their own official gazette until 1993. I don't know the exact reason why they elected to do that.
Which does not really correspond with what you suggested to the witness, Mr. Zivanovic.
I'm sorry, I'll double check it. Sorry. Anyway.
Okay, let's go ahead. It corresponds more with what the witness himself said.
Just a moment.
Mr. Zivanovic.
I just wanted to ask you this. When it comes to the strategic goal referring to the borders between the two worlds, as it is stated therein, was that ever realized?
Pa ako smo dobili
Answer. Well, if we got an internal border between Republika Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, that was translated into us having separated ourselves or ended up with a regionalization or cantonization. This is where the internal borders were drawn between Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republika Srpska.
A šta je sa granicama?
Question, and what about the other borders that are referred to in strategic borders as in strategic goals as borders between the two worlds? In other words, between Bosnia and Herzegovina on the one side and Serbia and Croatia on the other side. Answer. Well, this is the interpretation that we have mentioned and we have seen, which was articulated by Mr. Izetbegovic. And this is not to have a feeling of borders between the two worlds, meaning between Republika Srpska i.e. Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia. However, he was talking about the psychological border between the Serbs on the one side of the Drina and the other side of the Drina, because that was the problem, and that was the reason why special links were established.
Možete li mi još reći
Question: can you please also tell me whether that goal has ever been realized? Answer: in Bosnia and Herzegovina today, there are no passports to be flashed at the Drina River. You can cross the Drina River with your personal ID. There is a border, but you don't need a passport to cross that border. It is well known that Bosnia and Herzegovina is on one bank, on the other there is Serbia, and all the people can cross without any visa, without any special requests, which is beneficial for both the citizens of Serbia as well as for the citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina. However, this does not apply only to Serbs, but to all citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina and all citizens of Serbia. And the same situation is on the UNA, on the border between Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia, which means that all citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina can cross freely into Croatia, which is an independent side on the other bank of the river Una.
Hvala, gospodine Krajišnik, to bi bilo.
Thank you, Mr. Krajšnik. That will be all. I have no further questions for you.
One moment, Mr. Zivanovic. Yes, all right. I see Mr. Meek and Madame Favreau conversing. You've both asked to cross-examine Mr. Krajišnik. I saw your filing this morning, Mr. Meek. Who's going first?
Good morning, Mr. President, Your
Very good
Honors.
morning.
At this time, we have no questions on cross-examination for this witness.
All right, thank you, Mr. Meek. Then let's go round. Madam Nikolic.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. At this moment, I would kindly ask the trial chamber to allow us a 20-minute break in order to consult with our clients, because the examination in chief has been curtailed significantly.
Fair enough, Madam Nikolic. In the meantime, before we break, can I have an indication as to who else wishes to cross-examine? I know that you wish, Madame Favreau, if you still wish to cross-examine the witness.
Je dois me consulter avec mon client, mais vu l'intérêt.
I have to consult my client, Mr. President.
Fair enough. Let's have a. Would 25 minutes be enough for you, Madam Nikolic?
Ja, mislim čas suda.
I think so, Your Honor.
Okay, and in the meantime, should we find ourselves surprised the second time today, are you in a position to start with your cross-examination, Mr. Nichols?
I am, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
All rise for your
Sorry,
verdict.
and 25-minute break.